Thank you to all of you for joining us in the celebration of Reinette Popplestone's life. She was born on the 6th of December 1951 and left us on the 24th of July 2019. This video is for those who weren't able to join us that day and for those who would like to relive the special day that it was. The expected duration of Reinette's service was around 90 minutes. In the end, so many people had so many good things to say that it took almost 3 hours. Some time back in a Facebook post, Reinette said this: "One of the things I did decide long ago, well, say a year or so ago, was to choreograph my own funeral. I want it to be special, even if I'm not there to appreciate it."
Right. After all, thank you so much for being here today. If you recognise this top I'm wearing, no, I haven't yet started to clean my mother's wardrobe. Shopping was one of the things, shopping for clothes was one of the things she loved to do, and I particularly enjoyed that, or doing that with her, and when we found something that suited her, it very often suited me too, so we just buy two of them. I particularly love to hear feedback from her on all the compliments that she received. Sorry, I've just had a box of tissues delivered next to me here. I know I'm going to need them at some point. All the compliments she received about a particular item of clothing we bought together, and that always made me feel very special. I'd like to thank you all so much for being here today to commemorate a very special person. When my dad and I started considering a service for Reinette, we had to identify a suitable venue and guess at numbers that might attend. We honestly had no idea. I feel that the peace and beauty and tranquility of the gardens around us are a fitting tribute, and I thank the staff of Schoenstatt for their hospitality. In particular, Thomas at Schoenstatt has been a great help to us in accommodating our many requests which were changed at the last minute. I'd like to thank Ali Marshall and her team for organising the catering. I'd like to thank myself and the Highveld visitors for bringing the Highveld Winter's Day as opposed to Cape Town Rainy Day. And everybody here today for taking time out of their schedules to honour the awe-inspiring woman my mom was. I'd like to thank UCT News Page for giving me permission to reprint the articles that you may have seen outside, and also to use photographs that they had taken in shoots and interviews with her. My dad, Tony, for his advice during the preparation for today, for coordinating all the practical arrangements while I stressed about not just this presentation, but just the program, etc. And particularly for taking care of my mom so well for 44 years, and in particular in these last few months. Thank you. My dad and I have been touched by hundreds of calls, messages, emails, and so on that we've received. It struck me then that there are people whose lives Reinette touched that I've never even met, and the attendance here today is testimony to the person that she was. We also keep in mind many that sent messages of support and who could not be here today, and their thoughts are with us as ours are with them. So many messages honouring Reinette and her achievements via email, Facebook and other media, but my favourite sums up all that Reinette stood for. "I'm excelling at UCT still, and know that you would be so proud of me." Reinette was shameless in her desire to be noted. Her family believed that a woman should only marry a doctor, a lawyer or an engineer in order to be successful and fulfilled. She was invited to respond to UCT Vice-Chancellor Max Price's opening toast at the 2016 retirees dinner on behalf of the retirees.
Welcome to this special occasion. Tonight we're saying farewell to beloved members of our university family, our community, as they embark on the next journey in their lives. Many of you have dedicated your whole career to the University of Cape Town, and certainly UCT has benefited from your wisdom, the collective experience that you have built up, and we are going to miss that as you take your departure from us, there's certain things that I want to say to each of you. The first is thank you. Thank you for the commitment that you have shown and the loyalty to the institution, to the University of Cape Town, to your respective teams and departments and colleagues. And from me personally, for my own part, I want to thank you for the numerous ways in which you've contributed to the world, to the institution, to the students, to the growth of knowledge, and to helping UCT become and remain the great university that it is. And we look forward to seeing what you're going to do and making the huge success of that next chapter. So now I'd like to propose a toast to all of our retirees. And I invite you to charge your glasses and stand and toast each other and the retirees. To the retirees.
Greatly honoured to have been asked to respond to the VC's toast to those of us who have reached this milestone. The very fact that we are gathered here because we are retiring speaks to our loyalty to this institution and our admiration of its values and an acknowledgement that it has had our best interests at heart. I clearly imagine myself still part of this community. And I suspect that that is how most of the people in this room are feeling. We, rather than they or you. Thank you to the VC for his good wishes and his kind words. We wish him, his executive team, and everyone who will continue next year to work and study here a wonderfully exciting and rewarding 1917 and beyond.
Father has worn long trousers 3 times in the last 3 years. The first was at my cousin's wedding. There's a photograph amongst those that I've been displaying. The second was at that dinner, and the third, well, today. I'm receiving an invite to Vice Chancellor Max Price's farewell. Reinette was thrilled and particularly honoured. How she would have loved to see the attendance here today of so many well wishers and many that counted as VIPs in her life. Her outspokenness was mentioned in a few messages, which is something that I clearly inherited from her. Chris, you can't say that, she would say to me. I just did. On that subject, my dad and I were reminded just a day or so ago of my forthright attitude, especially where my mom was concerned. This friend accompanied Reinette and I, aged 4, onto a train. On finding all the seats taken, I marched up to some random stranger and announced, "This is my mom's seat." Said stranger graciously got up, how could they not? And my mom had a seat on the train. While it is known that Reinette travelled to London after finishing her schooling in order to train as a physiotherapist, little is known of just how tough it was for her to actually complete that degree. The blind students were expected to navigate not just from and to, but within busy hospitals, and not to appear, in quotes, blind. No white canes were allowed, and the students certainly were not allowed to use their hands ahead of them to find their way. You know, they had to effectively close curtains around a bed, in order to treat a patient without knocking over flower arrangements and things. It was pretty tough. And in an attempt to reduce the numbers of potentially, inconvenient blind students, the academic requirements were then raised to ambitious levels. And in spite of all of this, Reinette was one of few students to actually complete that course and qualify. One story that still makes me howl with laughter today, Reinette and her then boyfriend, who also happened to be blind, were living in London. They decided to hitchhike from London to Scotland to see his parents. At some point they were very lost. On hearing breathing and movement nearby, they asked this person, if they could assist them, tell them where they were. And there was no response. And they were a little bit peeved, and they tried again. Excuse me, would you mind helping us and telling us where we are? And there was a bit of a silence and suddenly a Even in January of this year, we chatted about how pointless it seems to have so many praise your life's work and say wonderful things about you when you're not present to hear them. So we talked in a very practical way about what form this living funeral would take. I lay on my stomach on her bed and Googled appropriate poetry, 2 of which are in the program today. I'd like to talk not so briefly about retinoblastoma. It develops in utero. It's a cancer of the retina of the eyes. It's a dominant gene. It can be hereditary, but it can also occur as a spontaneous mutation, as it did with Reinette. It can be diagnosed at birth if you're looking out for it. Before blindness itself, there's a phenomenon called leukocoria, which is the commonest initial sign, whereby in flash photography, instead of a red eye reflex, the affected eye or eyes have a white shine to them. So my take-home message to you today is if ever you see that, get that child medical treatment. And that's the early sign, obviously before visual impairment and those sorts of things. When my mom was pregnant with me, we weren't even that certain, or they weren't even that certain whether retinoblastoma was hereditary or not. One of my mom's closest and best friends, Judy, had the condition, and Judy's son, by that point, was about 18 months old. And it was clear that his vision was going, and he had incredible headaches as this cancer spread into his brain. And Judy contacted my mom and said, this is hereditary. As soon as your baby is born, get it checked out. So as far as my treatment was concerned, they made a gold radioactive plaque, which they were going to place behind the eye, radioactive to irradiate the tumour. In the 10 days it took them to make that plaque, the tumour had grown to such a size that the plaque would have been ineffective. So they then jumped in with chemotherapy and external beam radiotherapy. My upper face is very small, one of my big gripes in life. I'm very self-conscious about it. As a result of that radiotherapy, I found out, well, let's put it this way, I have sufficient vision to see and to drive and to work and use computers in my professional life. So I'm very fortunate, and one person I particularly like to credit, I'm not sure where Claire's sitting, but somebody that's joined us that I wasn't expecting today is Professor Claire Stannard, who was I think you're retired now if you have any sense, a paediatric head and neck oncologist, and Claire was crucial to my treatment and to my brother's treatment as well, and she's remained a close friend of the family, and Claire, I'm so pleased you're here today, I really am. I found out more recently that on chemo days, obviously chemo causes quite severe nausea and vomiting. My folks just didn't feed me. I mean, no wonder I have weight issues now. Many of you know that I had a younger brother, Kieran. Kieran had retinoblastoma in his pineal gland, which is a gland in the brain, and in one eye, but they weren't aware of the tumours in the pineal gland. And so he unfortunately died at 3 as a result of spread of that pineal tumour. I only discovered more recently that the stem cells that make up the pineal tumour are the same as those that make up the retina of the eye, hence what is sometimes termed trilateral retinoblastoma. The other thing with RB is that it is a genetic condition, it's a defect on chromosome 13, and it's actually the absence of a tumour suppressor gene. So whereas we might all have a few cells here and there that go a bit haywire, the rest of you have a gene which suppresses development of those tumours. I don't. So my mom had breast cancer at the age of 47, and then one of the common cancers that are experienced later in life is something called leiomyosarcoma, or LMS, and essentially that's a muscle cancer of the smooth muscle tumors, the involuntary muscle, and that muscle lines all our blood vessels, organs, muscle, skin, all sorts of things. She started with her what we called extensive pain. She had an ongoing and increasing pain, probably about 12 years ago now, I think. And it was expensive because she went for numerous investigations and went to numerous doctors and there was never a diagnosis. Fortunately, the primary was found in her pelvis. It wasn't surgically resectable. They couldn't cut it out simply because of where it was in her body. So it spread over the next 10 years or so. My dad often referred to her as being strong as an ox, to which my mom took a little bit of offense. After Karen's death, my mom was desperate to have children in her life again. She wanted to adopt, but I'm not sure if things have changed now, but a person with a disability wasn't permitted to adopt, and that was never an option. I mean, I turned out okay, didn't I? My mom became day mother to two young babies. Two working friends of hers had babies more or less at the same time, and my mom became day mother to Jason and Diane. In the photos, which I'll get back to in a moment, there is a beautiful photo of my mom when Jason was probably about 4 years old, which Martine had sent me on the evening after my mom's death, with flowers surrounding the photograph and candles and all the rest. It is a beautiful image. There's another photo in that selection which I just want to refer to quickly. When my mom graduated, she did her BA and then her honours at UCT. I think she started in '83, if I remember correctly. And when it came to graduation time, she had to get up onto the stage in Jamie Hall for the graduation. And so, me, I'm wearing pink, which is unheard of, and I'm wearing a dress, which is even more unheard of. But yeah, so I led her up onto the stage to receive her degree, and then led her down again. And as I led her down, until I've been to a rock concert, I've never heard such loud, rapturous applause. I think that everybody was, despite my mom's achievements, this whole thing was just too cute for words. It was raucous, it lifted the roof, and the person we really pitied was the one that was next in line at the graduation. They're in alphabetical order, and whoever's name came after Popplestone didn't stand a chance. I'd like to talk briefly about Rowan. Many of you know my parents fostered Rowan, who was a very severely disabled boy. Rowan was born to an alcoholic mother who left him in a shebeen on more than one occasion when she went out drinking. His grandmother, in fact, handed him over to the social services. Rowan had TB and left untreated. The TB became TB meningitis, which was about 7 months old. And so he never developed mentally beyond the age of 7, 8 months old. Although he was with us, he's now 16, although he was with us till March. Rowan's still alive, I don't mean that he's gone. He lived with us until March, and even at 16, he was in nappies the entire time. It was tough. He was very cute at 2. He arrived with my folks on Christmas Day 2004. But he soon became, in my eyes, a burden. He was noisy, huffing, puffing, demanding. He was hopelessly spoiled by my parents. And it put a lot of strain on the family. My folks would have heated discussions about what he should or shouldn't be eating and what medication he should or shouldn't have. And my all-time favourite, when last he had a dirty nappy. So my mom had increasing difficulty looking after for him as her health deteriorated. And I was concerned that for her it would be like losing Kieran, it would be like losing a son all over again. But in fact, what she described was the thought of him being institutionalized again as he had been when he first came to them. And she was very concerned about his welfare and how disorientated he would be not having, her to lie against every night when he fell asleep. But we found, with a lot of assistance, we found a fantastic place called Siguyile. It's a residential care facility. It's in the ground of Stikland Hospital out in the northern suburbs. My folks went to go and see the place, and my mom was particularly reassured by the very warm, compassionate people who work there. When the day that we dropped Rowan off, I came down to Cape Town to be here to support my folks both before and after. And when I got there, I also was delighted by the very happy, raucous children and the more or less a party atmosphere. So my folks know everybody at least has some peace of mind that Rowan is in a good space. Excuse me. At this point, I particularly need to mention Nkosana. Nkosana, where you? Oh, yeah, okay. Nkosana was first employed by my folks as Rowan's carer, and he grew to love Rowan as much as my parents did. I'd often hear when I was visiting, I'd hear Nkosana saying, "What's wrong, Fanam? What's wrong, my boy? What's your story, Rowan?" You know. And as Reinette's health deteriorated, Nkosana became as much my mom's carer as Rowan's. He was always respectful, he was always beautifully tender with my mom, and he referred to Reinette as Mama. Nkosana, she was your mama, and she was my mama. Nkosana's asked me to read these words for him. She was my mom too, my aunt and my sister. Her presence each day was a blessing to me. She was just but a servant of God, in touching the lives of many, including mine. She inspired many people, including me. All her friends were as wonderful as she was. There was a fountain of love in this home between Tony and Reinette. We had promised each other, she and I, that on that great day of the Lord, the glorious morning when the righteous will rise from their sleep, that she and I will meet again. It's just a moment. Mama Wam, my sister, Dada Wetu, I will miss you. Thank you, Kosa. Reinette certainly instilled independence in me, or perhaps it was there already. She was clearly a great role model. Back in the late 70s, our family lived in Sun Valley, close to Noordhoek. And between our house and the local shop was, and still is, Oak Amsterdam. My grandmother was visiting at the time. Bye-bye, I said to my mom and Oma. I'm going to the shop. Not taking me seriously, they said, bye-bye, Chris, see you later. Sometime later, they received a phone call from the shopkeeper. I was there, buying stuff, but with no money to pay for it. That I made it across a busy roadway, even then, is remarkable. Like any difficult teenager, I didn't always get on with my mom. I'm a bit of a loner with trust issues. I went to England to go to work, and I got to England at age 23 and suddenly realized how very far away I was and how very alone. Ma and I at that point subsequently became best friends again. Writing and proofreading and editing of Hands-On was something we did together while I was in England. We used to do it via Skype. Hands-On is a book that my mom wrote with my assistants, effectively teaching children, but not just children, teaching them Braille. And I'm proud to know now that apparently it's the main teaching aid and has been translated to all 11 official languages. It was one of her many accomplishments in the area of literacy and education for visually impaired people. I want to mention Antoinette now. Antoinette Goethe was a teacher of my mom's when she was at Worcester School for the Blind, and I'm absolutely thrilled, Antoinette, that you could join us here today. Antoinette, in my mom's words, taught her everything that she knew about Braille. Reinette was selfless. She was always putting others before herself, and often in fact feeling that her efforts were inadequate. I've read and seen many tributes to what she's achieved, and yet the feedback I always got was, "Chris, I'm not doing a very good job, am I?" One way in which we're very alike is our empathy for others, not necessarily identifying with a group as a whole, but with an individual and with an individual's struggles. The idiom, putting oneself in someone else's shoes, has been taken pretty literally by both of us. And I realise today that the term is empath, and that's entirely what we were and are. Another thing that we loved doing together was watching films with audio description. I developed a knack of describing in as few words as possible so as not to detract from the film itself what was actually happening on screen when there wasn't audio to go with it. And one movie that we loved together was Anthony Hopkins in Shadowlands, the story about C.S. Lewis, when he says, "We read to know we're not alone." And that was absolutely Reinette. She devoured books. Reading was her escape, and through the Grandstand Library for the Blind, she read extensively. Initially, she also used tape aids for the blind, extensively with little boxes of cassette tapes with books read onto them. And that was eventually replaced by Audible. We have 25 credits if anybody needs an Audible book. And she said to me more recently that when she was missing Rowan, she drowned herself in books. My mum and I were always musical. We shared music. I shared that love of music with her. In particular, I love many of her favourites from the 70s. I'd like to play one now, and after that I'll be incapable of talking. So Michelle Buerta has very kindly agreed to sing a hymn that my mother particularly loved.
It's such a great honor for me to be here today to sing for you and for Reinette. I was commissioned to sing this song quite some time ago in one of Reinette's famous Facebook posts. And she said that this was a hymn that her mother had drawn comfort from towards the end of her life, and one that she was drawing comfort from herself. And it's a hymn about the faithfulness and steadfast love of God, even in times of great sorrow. And as I've been thinking about that this week, and thinking about stillness and what that means, the words of Jesus from Matthew 11 have been ringing in my ears. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And I've been thinking about that idea of rest and assurance. How badly do we need that in our world today, and that we can have that reconciliation with God, and know that even in times of great trial, our souls can be still. The version of the song that Reinette really enjoyed was quite a sparse one. It was just organ, and I think she described the singer as a somewhat cold Irish father. Now, I'm not sure how noticeable it is, but I'm not a little old Irish man. But nevertheless, there's a piece in the middle of this song that's just a beautiful instrumental, and I'd like to encourage you to use that as a time to reflect, to pray, and to remember Reinette.
The
ask a family member, Grandpower, to pray with us.
Thanks, Kirsty. I guess everybody here has got a serious lump in their throat. Michelle, thanks for that beautiful song. Tony, I just want to say to you that we as a family, we just respect you so much for just being a servant-hearted person. You're amazing. You're a role model. Kirsty, just as you guide and lead, we just see so much of Mom's talents and boldness. And I met your mom when Tony and I were still teenagers, just coming out of our teens and early 20s. And last night we were sitting around the dinner table and I had my 3 kids there and 5 grandkids. And they were talking. Lauren was telling them about Tony and Reinette visiting us up on the west coast. This would have been about 1979. And how Reinette insisted on also going on a horse ride. And when that horse got to the other end and we all walked them across there and turned, and of course it was back to the stables and they would gallop off. Tony was the one that came second best. And he tells me it was the first time he ever got on a horse. I think it was the last time too. As I look at some of these photos and as I just hear and am reminded of the impact that Reinette has had on probably every one of our lives. When you think of a Mother Teresa for the impaired, and that's what I sat there, that's the kind of vision that went through my mind. And early this morning, it must have been 4 o'clock or 4:30, I was awakened. The scripture in 2 Corinthians 4, the tail end and the beginning of 2 Corinthians 5, came to the fore so much, and I'd just like to quickly read that for you before we pray. It is written, I believed, therefore I have spoken. With that same spirit of faith, we also believe and therefore speak, because we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus from the dead will also raise us with Jesus and present us with you in his presence. All this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. Therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we may be wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Now we know that if the earthly tent, this body we live in, is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now it is God who has made us for this very purpose, and has given us the Spirit as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. Therefore we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in this body, we are away from the Lord. We live by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from this body and at home with the Lord. May I ask if we can all stand? We've been sitting for a while. Let's pray. Father God, as we gather here on this beautiful winter's afternoon and the sun is shining and our dams are almost full, we just bring before you Reinette, an amazing, servant-hearted, role model, lady, mentor, coach, someone that has impacted every single one of our lives. Lord, I ask that you will welcome her home now. that she will be there even alongside of her son, and in time to come, her husband, her daughter, her friends. And so I thank you, Lord, for the life of Reinette, an amazing lady. Thank you for the years that you've allowed her to be within this family, the impact she's had. Now, Lord, I pray for Tony, for Kirsty, that you'll just fill that void with your love, with your peace, and that they can have the knowledge that in time they will be reunited. No ailments, no sickness, but in perfect joy. And so we thank you, Lord, for the privilege that each of us could have to be here today to show our last respects to an amazing lady. And we pray a blessing over the family, and we ask that you will guide and direct them, and these photos and these memories will continue to just live on as we remember someone that has impacted us all in an amazing way. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Greg. I really do appreciate that. I'm now going to invite Mr. Derek Greeff to say a words on behalf of the...
Kirsty and friends, and Tony. I haven't seen Tony, so Tony, make yourself known to me whenever possible. But for the privilege of being here, I have one formal tribute to Reinette, but if I can indulge Kirsty,
Yes, of course.
I want to also quote two anecdotes. I've known her for over 60 years. That's a very long time. We were together at school. I won't tell you how naughty she was, because she was very naughty. She was a naughty girl. But she was a girl with a lot of energy, as you all know. But two things that I just want to tell you about. When Kirsty was 11 years old, you can't think that she could have been 11, but she was 11 at one stage. When Kirsty was 11 years old, her mother and Kirsty would go to the shopping centre and to go and buy groceries. And Reinette will stand at the end of the aisle with the trolley, and she will send Kirsty into the aisle to go and fetch the stuff that she needs. And Kirsty was taught to look at the prices, to look at all the other goodies. And she was well taught. And then she would bring the stuff to the trolley where her mother waits at the end of the line. And the lady came up to Reinette and said, "What are you doing to this girl?" "No, I'm just sending her to fetch stuff." "You cannot do that with an 11-year-old girl." And Reinette said, "We can give children much more responsibility than what we normally do." And that was a lesson that I learned from her. And when my children grew up, that's what I did with them as well. And the second one was Reinette. I was also trained as a physiotherapist, and I know all about that training, Kirsty. Mm-hmm. It was tough. But they said if you're going to be a blind physiotherapist in the world, you have to be tough. So Reinette worked in Cape Town, and then she, at one stage, she said, "But I've got 2 hours a day that I haven't got anything to do. So what can I do in the 2 hours of the day?" And instead of normally just sitting out in the sun or so, she said, "I'm going to study in those 2 hours." So that's what she did. She used her spare time, 2 hours a day, and she studied, and you all know the results of that. BA, master's degree, university, only because of using 2 hours. And she taught me a lesson. When there's 2 hours in a day that you don't have anything to do, look for something to do and you will prosper from that. That's a lesson I can convey to you today. Now the formal presentation comes from the South African Braille Authority, or normally called SABA. And the title is "The Loss of a special person. She was a special person, eh? Reinette attended the School for the Blind, now called the Pioneers School, I'm reading now, in Worcester, where she matriculated in 1969. During her time at the school, she forged many lifelong friendships with fellow learners who kept in touch with her for the rest of her life. Many of them kept in touch with her. After matriculating, she went to London, as Christy said, where she did physiotherapy, and on completion of her course, she returned to Cape Town, where she practiced for a while, for a time. I don't know how long that was. For several years, let's put it that way. Several years. Okay. During this time, she met Tony, and they got married. And besides raising a family, she later studied English at the University of Cape Town, as I just indicated to you, where she achieved or attained a master's degree, and up to her employment at the university, where she eventually became the head of the university's disability unit. And I think that's where she also ended her activities at the university. Braille, when we come to a very important point, Braille was always vitally important to Reinette. Since the establishment of Braille SA, the predecessor of the now South African Braille Authority, or called SABA in short, she participated in its work, where she played a vital role. During the 1990s, she accepted a position as Braille consultant in Worcester, and she was elected onto the executive of the International Council on English Braille, generally called ICEP, and became its public relations officer. Through the years, she continued her involvement in Braille matters, but participating in the development of the Unified English Braille Code, and she authored a very highly regarded Braille training manual called Hands-On that was also mentioned earlier. She also did important work in SABA's Quality Assurance Committee. During the last few years of her life, she served on the executive of SABA as its deputy president, which was a major achievement. Reinette was a highly intelligent, motivated person. I think we all know that. But she always remained modest, even to the point of being self-deprecating, never considering herself to be better than other people. She had a quick wit, as Kirsty can tell you, and an engaging sense of humor. She was an independent thinker and was never afraid to challenge concepts with which she did not agree. That I can also confirm. But she always did so that in a way that did not agree, but she, sorry, I'm reading over again, but she always did so in a polite and open-minded manner. On behalf of the South African Braille Authority, we at the Braille Saba, we wish to say that we celebrate Reinette's life and the major role she played in many aspects of Braille. We will dearly miss her valuable contributions as well as her friendly and warm personality. To Tony and Kirsty and all her friends and relatives, we express our heartfelt condolences. May we all have the strength to bear this sad loss. That is as far as Saba is concerned. Now my last task is, on behalf of Reinette also was involved in another organization called Blind SA. And because of her knowledge and expertise in Braille, she was involved in the Braille production and Braille development at Blind SA. And on behalf of the President of Blind SA, Ms. Kathy Donaldson, and the CEO, Mr. Jason Nair, I also offer the organization's sincere condolences to the loss of Reinette. Thank you.
Who led active lives, were in the military, and then during war or times of conflict, many of them were blinded, but many also lost limbs or had serious injuries as a result of bombs and explosive devices. I have been amazed. I mean, my mom's blindness, you grow up being blind, it's kind of something you live with and that's how you live. But to become visually impaired later in life through a condition or trauma like that just really blew me away. The first St. Dunstan's reunion I attended, there's a lovely, very naughty lady by the name of Charmaine, who introduced my mom and I on the Saturday evening at the gala dinner to caramel vodka. Let's just say that trying to find our way at the game lodge where we held the reunion that year was very much a case of the blind drunk leading the blind. I don't quite know how we got back to our rooms. Didn't we? Thanks, Jackie. We got hopelessly lost. At one point we stumbled into a ditch. But the point is that we laughed so much that we both actually wet ourselves. We did that a lot. At the end of each holiday we'd rate it by how often we'd laughed until we nearly wet our pants. And through St. Dunstan's, I've become part of an extended family, so I'm touched that Brian Figaji recently retired from St. Dunstan's, am I correct? Has attended. He only arrived from overseas yesterday, so it's great that you could join us today. Brian also coincidentally was high up in Peninsula Technikon when I studied radiography, so he actually presented me with my degree 20 odd years ago. So yes, I'm now going to ask Jeremy to speak on behalf of St. Dunstan's. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Before I get into the sort of more hilarious side of anecdotes around Reinette, perhaps I better just deal with the formality. So on behalf of St. Dunstan's, of the staff and the boards of directors and the beneficiaries, one of whom is here today, Brian, we would like to wish the family well and to offer our condolences on this occasion. Now, having said that, I've got to say that Reinette made an enormous impact on St Dunstan's in the board and becoming part of the St Dunstan's family. Reinette and I and another board member, John, joined the board at the same time, way back in 2004. And I'd known Reinette, but not as well as I began to know her. And we grew to become fast friends. And we had many things in common, particularly our love of reading, and so we had many hilarious reading conversations, discussing various technologies over the years that would serve us and invariably not serve us, as blind technologies are often wanted to do. But one of the interesting things about Reinette was that she really took to one of our tasks on the board of St Dunstan's is we have 3 trusts. The one is the Blind Veterans Trust, the other is the Ian Fraser Memorial Bursary Fund, and the last one is the John and Esther Elliman Memorial Fund. And the Ian Fraser Fund is a blind bursary that has been in existence since 1974. And both Reinette and I, and several people in this room, benefited from that bursary fund when we were at university in the 80s. And so it was without too much difficulty that Reinette slipped into the role of chairing a subcommittee on the bursary fund when we adjudicated who should receive a bursary, how much they should get. And in fact, Michelle Buerta is another one who sang earlier, is another member, is another beneficiary of that trust. And so Reinette very quickly showed us that she was instinctively clever around making decisions in particularly that committee. But her encyclopedic knowledge of higher education became invaluable. Her understanding of the machinations of the NSFAS bursary itself, knowing many of the beneficiaries who would receive bursaries and then sometimes wouldn't receive bursaries, she had a role in because she knew many of the people and she understood the game, so to speak. I found myself being rather an appendage in those meetings. And she was strong and forthright, and what I loved about Reinette was that she had this wonderful wit, which she didn't necessarily always wear on her sleeve, but she was able to slip into when needed, and she was the master of a non sequitur, where she would slip in an anecdote or a homily, often in Afrikaans, for the sake of effect, one imagines, and which would bring the house down. And when she wasn't reading Braille, which she read like an angel, she read Braille rapidly without pause and clearly enjoyed the experience. When she spoke, without notes or without Braille, she slowed her cadence down and was much more measured in her delivery. And I think it was her signature style where she actually thought about just about every word she was saying. And it sounded slow, but what you got to realize was that she was considering every word that she was about to say and would say. And I can think of one incident only where she perhaps didn't get that quite right. And we were in a workshop together that I was facilitating, and she was a delegate in the workshop. And there was some debate and controversy amongst the delegates about a particular issue. And there was some consensus reached, reluctant consensus reached about this particular issue. And there was a pause, and I was just about to continue. And Reinette said, "Hang on, I just want to add," she said, I have a butt. And it's a rather large butt. And of course I can't remember what on earth she was going to say after that. It got lost in the hilarity that ensued, which did a wonderful job in levelling out the controversy or whatever it was. And so Kirsty mentioned earlier that in St Dunstan's we have these reunions. And Reinette missed one or two of the reunions, but she was there for almost all of them. And our reunions meant we would go away somewhere, often to Durban, to a particular hotel, take all the beneficiaries that we could, and have a 4-day long weekend, a lot of workshops, a lot of work being done, but a lot of relaxation too, and no small amount of drinking And yes, indeed, I remember that the caramel vodka very that night. And she was a great fan, or rather, yeah, the beneficiaries adored her. And Reinette would literally walk the floor, being completely and utterly fluent in English and Afrikaans. In fact, there was no accent to discern. She would slip into long, lengthy conversations with the blind veterans themselves, and those reunions were always peppered with anecdotes and homilies, which often delivered in a sort of deadpan way. And so she will be sorely missed at our reunions. And then another interesting thing was that as part of our duties on the board of St. Dunstan's, we were expected, the then CEO, Charles Dixon, would take Reinette and I up to attend the blind biennials. And for those of you who are not familiar with the blind biennials, they're a mixture of English conservative politics and ANC Polokwane machinations. They are deeply politicized events, and are not for the faint-hearted, I have to say. And I remember one particular evening, an interesting thing that happens in blind conferences is this tendency, and perhaps I better start again in a slightly different way. We were having many drinks and quite an enjoyable evening with Judge Zakia Koob and others, and Reinette announced that it was time for her to go to bed. And her room was near mine, and I figured, oh, what the hell, let's do it. So I said, I'm pretty sure I know how to get home, back to the rooms. And so I was using my cane, and this was in a large conference center in White River. And what happens in blind conferences very often is if one or two people make known that they are going somewhere, invariably other blind people say, where are you guys off to? Can I hitch a ride? What you find is not untrue. So I was leading, and Reinette was holding my arm, and somebody invariably said, "Can I hitch a ride?" and held her arm, and then on and on and on. It's not uncommon for these trains, these cargo lines, to be 20 strong. It's also not uncommon to hear the back person say, "Where are we going again?" Somebody in the middle saying, "I have no idea." Anyway, so I was leading. The trouble with a long conga line like that is that it's susceptible to whiplash. The tail flicks up. And we were finding our way around. I was confident that I could find the room, but with increasingly tense length of chain behind it, I am afraid my usual excellent mental GPS became a bit hitched. And I was wandering around frantically now, quietly frantically, trying to explore where we were going, and Reinette was becoming more and more agitated. And I said, "Reinette, what's the matter?" She said, "Are you lost?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I know exactly where I am. Just settle down. I'll get us home. Just relax. I think I know where we are now. I was a little belated a moment ago, but I promise you I know where I am." 10 minutes later, she said, "Oh God, you are lost, aren't you?" And I said, "Relax, man, this is fun, isn't it?" She said, "No, I have to make a wee." So Reinette, once again, I'd like to say, will be an indelible part of the St. Dunstan's family forever. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeremy, for the giggles. Okay, so we now will welcome Mr. Alan McNeil, who is representing Pioneer Printers.
Hi, good day, everybody. So, on behalf of Pioneer Printers, understand the chairperson of our board and Hugo, the head of Pioneer Printers, we'd like to say our condolences to Tony and Christy. And Andre just gave me a few words to say about Reinette. He said Reinette had a brilliant mind. She had a sharp intellect. Her dedication to the cause of the disabled, and especially the blind, is commendable and praiseworthy. Her contribution towards the development of Braille codes is invaluable and will have influence on Braille for a long time to come. And she also wrote the Braille training manual called Hands On, and that booklet of work, well, it helped many visually impaired. And on behalf of Pioneer Printers, Skalkio, and the staff at Pioneer Printers, Reinette left us with many legacies. We will always remember Reinette for her dedication to Braille, as well as her hard work. She was willing to assist and get involved in matters concerning the development and promoting of Braille. She was also involved with setting and moderating question papers for Braille examinations. She also developed the new booklet for Afrikaans, the tables for the Braille codes. She was very involved with that. And it was dear to her, the Afrikaans Braille part, very dear to her. She was an excellent example to other visually impaired people of how to achieve academically and contribute to society by doing voluntary work, as we all know. She motivated the younger generation to better themselves by studying and use Braille and to read. Reinette did not let the opportunity pass by to give someone a compliment. That's in her to do that. She will be missed. We will miss her quick mind and lively discussions. And I can remember she will explain to you, as Jeremy said, very slowly, in her way, and you will understand afterwards what she meant. That was Reinette. To husband Tony, daughter Kirsty, and the rest of the family, our thoughts will always be with you during this time. Reinette will be missed, but the memories will live on forever. Thank you.
My mum had her first experience with Uber a while back. And she hadn't used Uber before, but Jeremy, who spoke to us a short while ago, had assured her that it was easy as anything, that they call you just before they get there, or you can make a special request and say, well, look, I'll be a blind person with a cane or a blind person with a dog or whatever. And my mom particularly wanted to join her good friend Lila in attending a show at the Baxter Theatre. Now, bear in mind, my mom was coming from Fishhook. And so the Uber collected her, and she told the guy Baxter Theatre, and the guy seemed fairly confident that he knew where it was. Fortunately, Reinette and Lila had arranged to meet early before the performance, just as well as it happened. So off they go, and my mum suddenly realizes that this guy is more or less driving around in circles. And she says, well, where are we now? And he sort of says, well, we're on the main road. The main road stretches from Cape Town to Simonstown, so it could have been anywhere. And Lila's getting a bit concerned and a bit frantic, and she phones a few more times, and, you know, Reinette, are you okay? That it's taking a hell of a long time. And eventually my mom said to this guy, she had to get quite bossy, she said, listen, I need to know where we are. What road are we at? He said Clipper Road, which is in Newlands, so it's close enough. And so my mom actually ended up directing this guy, pointing out all the landmarks to him along Main Road in order to get to the Baxter. I'm not sure how you get to be an Uber driver and not know the Baxter Theatre, but that's another story. Another delightful story, and I need to thank at this point my best mate John, photographer on my right, and his lady Tamsin, who are recording this event for many who couldn't be here today. And John reminded me just now, I was in Johannesburg, and I phoned John. I said, where are you? He says, I'm in Muizenberg. Why, what's happening? I said, stand by, I'll come back to you. The UCT has a bus service that ferries both students and staff, blind and disabled students, from the university to their homes or to the station or wherever. And although the drivers of the buses are much loved and they know all the people very well, Mike Watermere's guide dog, I think it was Tubble at that stage, hey Mike? Okay. Mike's dog and my mom's dog, who were both black Labradors, were put in the back of the bus when they were collected from the university. Some part of the way home on the train, my mom realized that this was not her dog. And she then phoned me. What I was going to do about it from Joburg, I'm not entirely sure. And so I'd phoned Mom to be on standby to potentially meet her at a station so she could possibly get the next train back to reunite Mike with his dog. As it turned out, Mike's dog did come home with Reinette that night and spent the night, but he was quite unsettled, being in an unfamiliar environment. And similarly, I'm sure poor, I think it was Drum. I think poor Drum stayed with Mike, and Mike's dog stayed with my folks, and somehow they were reunited the next day. And I have to point out that, the bus driver, he's sighted. It's just two black labs. They're both males. They're more or less the same. You can see how it can happen. Just referring back briefly to St Dunstan's, the CEO of St Dunstan's, Gareth Morgan, couldn't be here today. He's overseas. And he sent me a message that I do want to share with you, because it just shows the impact that Reinette has, not just on visually impaired people. He says, I would like to share with you now what an impact Reinette made in the short period that I had the privilege of knowing her. I've met very few people who embodied positivity and care for others like Reinette. She helped me understand, helped me see, helped me to be a better person. I will forever be indebted to her for being who she was. Thank you, Reinette, for sharing your life and who you are with me. I'd also like now, I'd like to invite Tim Cope, a close family friend of ours, to read one of the poems that's in the program, and to say a few words about Reinette as well. Again, a poem that she requested. She had this one planned.
A few words about Reinette, first of all, just before I get into the poem. I think as we get older, we look back on our memories, and especially the good memories. And certainly amongst my group of friends, when we sit down with a glass of wine or whatever it happens to be, we say to each other, do you remember when? And then the story starts. And the story we probably retell 20 times or 30 times or 40 times, and it doesn't really matter that it's the same group of people. Because it's a good memory, we share it with each other. And if your name happens to get into one of those memories, then that gives you immortality. So this is the story of Reinette in a way, and her immortality with us. We'd been out for a Chinese meal, I think, and the odd glass of wine. Reinette in those days was drinking Southern Comfort rather than caramel vodka, but things changed. And for some reason, we decided, the rest of us obviously, we would go 10-pin bowling that night. Now, none of us knew which end of the ball to hold or anything like that, but down we went to go 10-pin bowling, and obviously Reinette wasn't going to be participating, but she was there for the banter. Now, when I say obviously she wasn't going to be participating, I'm lying. Because as far as Reinette was concerned, if there was something that we could do, it was something that she could do. And so eventually, when it came to her turn to bowl, we pointed her in the right direction, we put the ball in her hand, and we said, throw it towards those pins at the end. Well, she couldn't obviously see the pins, but we did try and point her in the right direction. The ball went about 5 foot in the air. It rolled off into a gutter, and she proudly scored 0 points. which in fact leveled my score, so she was very happy to say that she achieved quite as much as I did on the 10-pin bowling course, and it showed the nature and the character of the person, that nothing was beyond them. If we were going 10-pin bowling, she was going 10-pin bowling. And I think it showed the strength of her character, and it shows that when we sit down together with the odd glass of wine and we say, do we remember when we went 10-pin bowling? And that's when we speak about Reinette. I know it's a trivial story, but it actually shows much about her, that she was part of the group and did not feel in any way that she was handicapped or anything like that, and that's the sort of company that we enjoyed. I've been asked to read this poem. I'm told I have actually changed one line with permission. So the poem is entitled The Ship. What is dying? I'm standing on the seashore. A ship sails in to the morning breeze and starts for the ocean. She is an object of beauty, and I stand watching her. At last she fades on the horizon, and somebody at my side says, she is gone. Gone? Where? Gone from my sight. That is all. She is just as large in the masts, the hull and spars as she was when I saw her, and just as able to bear her load of living freight to its destination. Their diminished size and total loss of sight is in me, not in her, and just at the moment when someone at my side says she is gone, there are others who are watching her coming, and others' voices take up a glad shout. There she comes, and that is eternal life.
I'd just like to introduce Annette Dolman. Annette and my mum were at school together, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and they've remained friends ever since then.
I thought I would be the person who would actually knew Reinette for the longest time, but maybe there are people who know her longer than what I knew her. But I met her when I was 10 years old. I was then in grade 6 and she was in grade 5 when I had to move from a sighted school to the pioneer school, then School for the Blind in Worcester. And now if I can look at it if I look back, it was probably planned that way. But I landed together, the two of us landed together in the same bedroom. Reinette then had already 5-6 years of hostile life experience behind her back, so she could support me. And I did need some support. Although I was a fairly brave girl, I think, but I needed support. And there wasn't much that we could talk about because she was in grade 5 and I in grade 6. But she didn't have cold feet at night, 9 o'clock when it was lights out time. Then she started teaching me Braille. And I sponged it up. And believe it or not, I didn't write this down now, but she had an old Standard 8 history book that had fat Braille. And that's where she taught me from. Now, that's with contractions and everything. So Reinette it's like starting swimming in from the very deep side. She did it, and I sponged it up. And we stayed friends, and then my last year at Worcester, we also shared a bedroom, and by then, we could have actually really supported each other, because then we were in, the ups and downs of young loves and friendship and disappointments, and we could support each other. She supported me often. Then when we both left up for the next part of our life, she went to London and I went to Stellenbosch. We kept our friendship going. I just remember now she sent me letters from London on a tiny cassette, reel-to-reel little cassettes that you could just pop in a quilted envelope. And we kept contact. And then she moved back to South Africa, and we could resume our friendship by seeing each other, and we had our children together. So we could share ups and downs with that, and happiness and funny things, but we could share with each other. And she often, as was referred to this afternoon as well already, we could share our love for music and our reading, and she often mentioned books to me that she enjoyed and that she probably thought I would also enjoy. So she was a big encourager from that point of view as well. And I bothered her a lot with electronic advice. She's a boffin with that, I'm not. I just make use of what I can make use of. I asked her a lot of times, and she never lost face with me. She never said to me, you're not so right. If I look at Reinette, she didn't have she had a tough life. Things weren't easy. But Reinette never complained. She lived a life of perseverance. And she was a strong-willed person, but patient. And she never actually, as somebody said this afternoon as well, she would never say something that would hurt somebody on purpose. And if somebody said something unfriendly or unhelpful to her, she would try and analyze it and give the person the benefit of the doubt that the person didn't mean it the way she actually interpreted it. So she was a wonderful person. And then shortly, it's not even a couple of months ago, but one of my very last visits to her, she said to me, if there's one thing that she would still like, that she would love to do, and that is at her goodbye service, to let people have hope, that people would leave with hope in their heart. And I felt like just hugging her. I will remember that, and I will remember that forever, and I will miss Reinette as a friend, and I will keep praying for Kirsty and Tony. Thank you.
A tape conversion assistant, something or other. Originally, back in the early 90s, my mom started making text available to blind and visually impaired students by getting volunteer readers literally to come to our house in Rondebosch and read texts onto cassette. And that was the start of the disability services that she grew. Denise, thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. It's so wonderful to be here and see so many friends. And my condolences to Tony and to Kirsty and the rest of the family. Kirsty has already said half of my speech, but it's fine. I joined UCT as Reinette's assistant in 2000, and I worked with her for 17 years. And it was my honor and privilege to be part of Reinette's life at UCT. And on behalf of the colleagues at UCT, I would just like to say what a wonderful contribution Reinette made to the lives of so many students. We had over 40 students who were visually impaired who passed through our service, as well as many, many other students with disabilities. And we've been inundated this past week with condolences and tributes to pass on to the family of Reinette's contribution to everybody's life. And if you look on the UCT website, you'll see a condolence page, and it really just doesn't say everything that people are saying at the moment. For me, I had many good times with Reinette, and I remember joining in 2000. Mike Watermay and I worked together at that time, and my very first day at TCATS, which was Text Conversion and Assistive Technology Services, there were many more dogs present than cats. We used to laugh about that. I remember sitting in the office not knowing what to expect, and a couple of the male blind students came in and greeted me, and they started touching my head and my face, and they told me this is how a blind person greets. And I didn't know that this wasn't quite right, but anyway, I sat there for a week. And then I started feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and I told Reinette what was happening, and in no uncertain terms did she tell Sipiwe and Padle, no, this is not what you do. And she was so honest and warm and compassionate. I just remember her always being open, and I really appreciated that in her. She was a lovely person, and I'm so honored. She taught me everything I know about text conversion, and we sat many hours doing the exams for the students at UCT. Reinette would read the Braille and I would read the sighted, and we would always find errors which we would immediately tell the departments. We made a great editing team, and I think on behalf of all my colleagues in the Disability Service and everybody at UCT who knew and worked with Reinette, our love and thanks to the family for an absolutely wonderful person. I will never forget her. Thank you.
A son with the name Mark, and I have a friend sitting towards the back called Philip. And the three of us give you, Tony and Kirsty, our condolences. Now you may well ask, what do the three of us, myself, my son Mark, Philip, Tony, and Reinette have in common? And it goes back 35 years. My son Mark was at a school on the way to Port Elizabeth called Woodridge, and he had come to the end of his first year in Standard 6, which I think is grade 8 today. And he wanted to do something. So he organized 14 of his friends, and one of his visually impaired friends at school too, and said, we are going to cycle to Cape Town. Well, I roped in. Oh, and he said, we're going to do it to raise funds for the League of the Friends of the Blind. Now, Philip, to bring the other leg into the picture, is the past retired CEO and director of the League of the Friends of the Blind. And Tony and Reinette and 3 other tandems piloted by sighted people and engine-roomed by 4 blind people left Port Elizabeth with the blessing of the mayor of Port Elizabeth at the time. And we cycled to Cape Town. And it took us 7 days. And there were many adventures on the way and many anecdotes to tell. But I have 2 in mind, not to bore you with all the stories. The first was after a gruelingly hot first day in which we'd covered about 130 kilometers from Van Staden's Pass, where the school was, to the forest where we went to the campsite there. And one of the boys had found out that Reinette was a physiotherapist. Now, I need to interrupt myself by saying that Kirsten was a radiographer and she sees through people. Reinette felt through people and manipulated them. Now, the first boy who found out that Reinette was a physio could hardly walk from the stiffness in his legs. I assure you, 140 k's in midsummer with some effort. So he presented himself to Reinette and said, Reinette, can you massage my legs for me, please? Which she duly did, and the next minute they were all lined up. But Reinette had these fingers which were like steel, and they probed these young boys' muscles to the degree that they were screaming. But the next day, they were perfect. And I was the last in the line. And I have to admit that I screamed with pain. The other anecdote I need to share with you was not Reinette, but it could have happened to her. My engine room was a guy called Darwin. And as we left Mossel Bay to target Heidelberg, his one pedal arm broke. And so we went from a quadruped to a triped. And I said to him, put your foot here on the frame and you just pedal with one foot and I will do the other two. Which we did. And many hours later, we arrived in Heidelberg and I was suffering. And I had battled up every single hill on the way. And as we were lying out on the grass at the campsite in Heidelberg, Davy was lying that way and I was this way, both of us prone. And I looked at his left shoe. And this rubber-soled shoe had a groove running down.
Oh no!
Davy, instead of putting his foot on the frame, put it on the back tire. And he acted as a rem scoop. So, as somebody said earlier, Reinette remains in the memory of many of us for many diverse reasons. And my son, who's operating as we speak, and Philip, whom I can speak on behalf of because we've been friends for 40 years, give our strength and condolences to you and to Kirsty.
It's beyond me. My father, through gritted teeth, would be on the front of the tandem going, Rin, just pedal! And she would go, I'm pedaling! My father was panting so hard up some of those hills, the poor thing swallowed at least one fly. Antoinette, sal jy nou praat, Spief? Antoinette, as I mentioned earlier, is one of my mum's.
My stories about Reinette start in the late 1950s when she was a kindergarten child. I started teaching in Worcester. At that time I was a music teacher. And I lived in the hostel for the younger girls. And one of our duties as living-in teachers was to write letters to the children's parents on their behalf, because those little children couldn't use a typewriter yet, and their mothers did not then and perhaps never learned Braille. So they had to come and tell us what we should write. All right, it was rather difficult because I wanted to write the letter as a child would write it. And they told me to write about this and to write about that, but not in the words of the person who lived that memory. They would say, on Saturday we went for a picnic. No, she wouldn't say that right now. We went for a picnic on Saturday. Yes, she would say that. And I said, what about it? Well, did you enjoy it? Yeah, tell my mother. Yeah, tell my mother we went out for a picnic. And then tell my mother I enjoyed it. And so on, but not in her own words. One after the other, and after I've tried to teach them to do it in the way I would have, I and their parents would have loved to receive the messages, I stopped bothering. I just went on somehow with something in between their words and mine. And here comes the little girl, Reinette. She was about 6 or 7 years old. And she takes a seat across my table and she says, "Lieve Papa and Mama," dear father and mother. I thought, and I started typing. And as fast as she tells her story, I typed in her own words as if she is the boss and I'm the secretary. And I thought, this child, we must keep in our minds, we must watch her, something will become of her. The world will know about her in future. It's not wrong. Another memory of our friendship was when she was in what we called Standard 8 at that time. Should have been grade 10 now. And she took music as a subject. I was a music teacher. He took music as a subject, and on that particular day, the homework that they brought in was to write a melody. I can't remember whether it was words that they had to set to music or whether it was just a little figure that they had to build onto or whatever. And I've seen the paper that she brought in before they came. Oh dear, this is quite a good melody. She's a very musical child. It's a very good melody, but she doesn't know, or she doesn't. Of course she knew, but she doesn't use the correct Braille rules. Now, if you know about Braille music, it's not lines and spaces like you're used to in a music stand. The words are named by something which represents the letter name. There's a letter for the note G and a letter for the note A. It's not a G and an A, but a symbol for the letter name of the word. And you have to write octave signs to tell you which of the 7 or 8 notes on the piano that is. But you can't do it for every note. That'll be too much about nothing. You had rules to consider. Do I go up or do I go down when it's more than one note in between? And Reinette didn't use octave signs at all. She just wrote down the names of the notes. And I could see what the memory was supposed to be. But I was nasty. I said, "I'm going to play to you what you've written." And I started on the correct note because there was an octave sign there, which tells me which G it was. And I played up and up and up and up on the piano until I reached the wood of the piano after the highest note. And there was silence. And I said, "Reinette, this should have been a very good melody. But when you become a composer," she was very musical, "when you become a composer, you will have to engage me as your transcriber, because you won't be able to do it yourself if you do it this way. She said, okay. So you can see from that little story that even at that time we were friends. Another thing I remembered very well about her was about in the must have been around 1990, I think. We had Blind SA had a project to tell young children how it would be at university, what would the environment be like. And Reinette had to do that. We had many speakers, but Reinette was one of them. And she started talking to those children like a professor would talk to his students, in very good language, in very sure of herself manner. It was so well done. I wish I had a recording of it. I think that little episode was the best part of what we tried to bring over to the children. So you see, Reinette was, for me, somebody very special. I knew her when she was in school, as I said. I knew she wrote letters to me when she studied physiotherapy in London. She visited me at home when she was pregnant with Percy, so Percy also visited me very often. And she helped me working in the library. That was the time that she was expecting Percy's courtesy. And just about every single change in her life, we shared. And she became very involved in Braille matters, and so did I. We had several projects. Either it was my project and she helping me, or it was hers and I was helping her. We worked very well together. She was one of the best friends I ever had. Thank you.
Margot would love to have been here today. She absolutely adored my mom, and in turn my mom and I adored Margot. It's unfortunate that she couldn't be here, but she also has a demanding schedule.
So this is Margot, and I wish I was with you today, but I'm not. I'm in Joburg. I last saw Reinette in January when we had great fun spending a few hours planning her living funeral. It didn't turn out that way. So instead for her actual funeral, I'll read the following poem. Death is Nothing at All by Henry Scott Holland. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I've only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well. Nothing is hurt, nothing is lost. One brief moment, and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again.
Thank you for that, Marks. I asked Margaret to read that one because I knew I couldn't, but all is well. I've been asked to read a tribute from my Aunt Beverly and my cousin Tracy. They were both very close to my mom and dad. To us, Reinette was a sister, a dear friend, an auntie, and a godmother. A warm, loving, compassionate being, she's left an indelible mark on our lives with her courage and determination, facing the many obstacles and challenges thrown at her while maintaining her witty sense of humour and her enormous love for wanting to make a difference in people's lives, especially the children. We have so many happy memories that make us smile whenever we think of her. Many, many years ago, I remember asking her and Tony where they'd met. The response, on a blind date. Followed by heaps of laughter. Another time, there was this big empty picture frame hanging on the lounge wall. She asked if we liked her new picture. I hate to tell you this, but it's empty. She laughed and said she wondered how many people would actually have told her that or just played along. We are so thankful that God brought such a special person into our lives, and we feel privileged and honoured to have known and loved her, and will miss her terribly. Bev, Tracy, thank you.
We go to Tony and Reinette's house after Bridge. They had a little flat in Rondebosch, and I'm just telling you the story because this epitomizes Reinette. We all used to go to their house and we used to sit and discuss bridge hands and have great hilarity. And the one night, Reinette was in the bath, and they only had one bathroom. And my late husband was dying to have a pee, dying. So he knocked on the door and he said, "Reinette, please can I come into the bathroom? I need to pee." She said, "Of course you can, Steve. I promise I won't look." I think I hadn't seen Reinette for a couple of years, but I loved her dearly. And I think Reinette was the golden thread that ran through the cloth of so many lives. We'll always have that golden thread in our cloth to remember. That's me.
So we're both crazy. We're on Tony's side of the family, but Reinette, I think from very young, we actually live in Johannesburg, and from very young, I always remember our holidays coming to Cape Town, and always, as you're driving into Bishop, the smell of the sea is like always the first memory. And Reinette was actually such a big part, and Uncle Tony, such a big part of the holidays. And one particular memory that I kept sharing with my mom and sister was, I must have been somewhere around the age between 8 and 10. And I remember being at Uncle Tony and Auntie Reinette's house, and I was with Auntie Reinette, and I think she had some kind of office or something, and I was sitting with her, and as a young 8 to 10-year-old does, gets very bored very quickly, and I said to her, I want to do something, and I thought maybe she'll let me play with her guard dog or some toys, and what she did was teach me Braille, and it was amazing. And I still remember going back to school, they ask you when you come back from holiday, what did you do? And I told everyone, I know Braille. So it was a very, very fond memory of mine. And the impact that's had, even throughout my life now, is I do a lot of work with disability awareness in the workplace. And I really credit Auntie Reinette with that. And even now, how I laugh, because when I was telling my work, I had to come for a funeral, and they said, is it someone close? I said, yes, it's my aunt. It's this aunt I've been talking about in all my workshops. And so everybody knows the stories of Auntie Reinette. And it's just wonderful, because even the stories live on through other people that don't even know her. And that's the impact she's had. So she's raised a wonderful voice.
I realise it's now getting to hectic traffic time, but we are really touched by the turnout today. My mom didn't get her living funeral, didn't get the tribute, but I'm confident that she's looking down, and big broad smile. Thank you all very much.